Here we go. So again, very grateful to MillerKnoll for sponsoring this workshop. This is the first. At the end of our presentation, we'll be sharing more information on the second, which will be in person in Queens. We've also had them in person in Brooklyn and in Manhattan. So we are trying to get this out as equitably across the city and internet as we can. So that being said, let's get started. Here's our overview for the day. Looking at kind of welcoming you all, talking a little bit more about our team at Big Reuse, why we're focused on trees, basic street tree care, kind of what's allowed, what's not allowed, tools and supplies, the things to avoid, some great organizations doing this work across the city, and then contact information and resources, not only for myself and L'Oreal, but for others that we know that if we can't put you directly in touch with them, we will definitely get any information you need. First and foremost, I want to say L'Oreal and I are pretty active in the community. That's how we ended up here. And so we're going to hustle and bustle to make sure that you get what you need from this and beyond. We're kind of already attached and we're here to help you out. So that being said, L'Oreal, that's our team, Gil Lopez in the middle, who's not on our call right now. L'Oreal, take it away.
Fantastic. So much of what we do is we focus working with 12 different council member districts across Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. And we operate a reuse warehouse in Gowanus. And that's where we initially started as an organization. The Street Tree Care program was started about 3 years ago, and it has flourished to include working with schools, civic groups, and we're always looking for partners. Much of what we do is education in schools. So we work with numerous schools throughout the 3 boroughs. We're hoping to to expand as we receive funding and support. The Street Tree Care, again, is where we provide essential tools, care, and soil amendments with compost mulch to help existing trees thrive. Our most important thing is community engagement. So we want to partner and network with individuals and groups so that folks have these tools to go out individually. And also, if you are interested in starting a stewardship group, we want to make sure that you have these particular tools so that you can go out on your own to do this work. And, our urban canopy is, it is growing. The city is supporting tree planting in various boroughs. And we need folks on the ground to make sure that these trees can actually survive as they're being planted. And then, of course, we're talking about our mature trees that also need assistance. So what we do is we engage and educate communities. We also work with BIDs, business improvement developments, block associations, youth groups, civic organizations. And we want folks, to feel comfortable working and stewarding in public spaces, working with urban soil, and, making sure that our street trees really can survive as we, continue to, move forward, especially with, the climate crisis. We want to make sure that these trees can, have a good future.
And just quickly to interject, if you are already part of a community group, feel free to reach out to us via email after this and let us know if this is something that you'd like to take part in. L'Oreal and I, our team is funded in, as she said, 12 different districts. I'm happy to connect with you to see if that you're living in a district or working in a district that is funding and that we can kind of support. So we will definitely love to hear from you because, again, we're all about community. So that being said, our goals, and I think L'Oreal just covered this, we're really here to support. We're enabling community, we're fostering innovation and growth, and we're advocating for economic sustainability, enhancing the quality of life for all living things. So that's who we are. We're going to jump into why trees. Why do we do this work and what is the focus? Um, I guess I can start if that's cool with you, L'Oreal.
Mm.
Yes, awesome. So L'Oreal and I are going to just play off each other. We talk about why trees. Trees, we think about them kind of in the most obvious ways. I think that's when it usually comes up. We talk about psychological benefits, especially since COVID. We talk about community beautification, not to mention getting together with your community members and bonding, which ties into psychological benefits. We talk about the economic benefits. Curb appeal is very real, especially in New York City. It makes a difference. We also talk about wildlife, not just, rats. We all love to talk about rats, but we're also talking about birds and squirrels and insects and mammals and some of the kind of lesser seen wildlife. Um, it's a huge way to reduce noise pollution and, of course, provides ecological services, clean air, water, food production, pollination, flood control, sequesters carbon, everyone's favorite topic, and, recreational activities. It's really nice in the summer to be under a tree and not standing on the hot, sidewalk. So these are kind of some of the more basic reasons that people generally think of trees. I'm guessing, and I'm not one to assume, but I would guess that most of you here already know that, and you're more interested in the deeper and probably more scientific reasons that we're focused on trees, specifically increasing air quality. The carbon dioxide oxygen exchange, of course, trees, we all went through school at one point or another and learned about photosynthesis. It's a beautiful stat I always like to highlight that a large tree can produce enough oxygen for 4 people a day. That's a large, healthy tree. That's incredible. I think it's just kind of amazing. One day, 4 people kind of gives us, or me personally, an idea of like how we exist in this world. Improved health, of course, talking about different diseases like asthma, stroke, heart disease, lung cancer, pneumonia, definitely ties to air pollution. And of course, trees help kind of mitigate, they remove dust and dirt and soot from the air, along with other heavy particulates. And then, of course, global climate change, the hot topic that everyone's talking about, but it's very real. More in our city specifically, we talk about the urban heat island effect. Could I ask, like, I know this is a little cheesy, but raise of hands. Do we all know what the urban heat island effect? Have we heard that before? Yes, no, no. Okay, I'm seeing like head shakes. Yes. Okay, cool. So it's mixed. Thumbs up. Thank you for engaging me. Because it's always good for me to know what we know and don't know. So yeah, the urban heat island is an effect that happens where it's specific to urban areas, and it really means that urban areas are really significantly warmer than other non-urban areas because of the amount of land that is being used by humans engaging in a very active way. So kind of like what I said before about trees and being under a tree in the middle of the summer versus being completely exposed, the asphalt and concrete absorbs that sun's radiant heat and it releases it throughout the day, heating up, of course, everything around it. It forces our air conditioners and everything else that runs on energy to run more, which also, of course, increases air pollution and therefore all of the other health risks that we just discussed. So going forward, going backwards, this is the urban heat island effect. So again, you know, shade makes a big difference. Trees do sweat, so there's transpiration, there's moisture in the air. I know we don't have a particularly humid environment here, but it does make a huge difference. And of course, it reduces energy use. If you're living in an area where you're lucky enough to have a tree outside your window and it's providing some kind of shade in the summer, I mean, for most of us that may or may not be born New Yorkers, or if you've come into the city and moved around a few times, maybe at one point you had that, you might or might not have noticed your air conditioner works a lot less. It doesn't need to be turned on as much when you have that tree, that healthy tree, ideally outside your window. So you're not using as much energy, which, you know, is great. That's the dream. And then, of course, last but not least, mitigating combined sewage overflow. I have a few photos here because combined sewage overflow can be a little bit complicated to understand. And usually it's just here. I'm going to show you the photo now. So, and I'll just read 60% more or less of the city has a combined sewage system. So, what you can see in the photos here is the difference between dry weather conditions on the left and wet weather conditions, rain, snow, on the right. And when you have a combined sewer system, there's that single pipe that carries both stormwater runoff and sewage from buildings. So you're talking about one pipe carrying both of those things, and it's usually sent to a wastewater treatment plant. Okay. This system, of course, it overflows, right? So if we have more trees, those trees, the beds themselves are absorbing the water, right? They want it. If those trees are healthy, we're talking about happy trees with aerated soil, which means that they're taking in all that moisture and it's going right back into the tree, as opposed to no trees, it's going straight into the sewage system. So healthy trees mitigate that. Oops. They also capture rain. I think I kind of just spoke to that. And then, of course, the infiltration, right? The root system helps get into the ground and pass it on to other trees. So there's a lot of opportunity here in terms of the beauty and the wonder that are street trees. All trees, but specifically street trees. So that's our focus today. Let's get into, I'm actually going to pause and just like take a moment. Are there any questions, anything you want to drop in the chat before we get into basic street tree care, the events that we do and kind of how you might want to or be interested in doing it yourself? Are there any questions about why we're focused on trees or our team or who we are? Feel free to write in the chat at any point. I'm happy to answer. L'Oreal's happy to answer. And we will, of course, have a Q&A at the end, but again, just want to engage and give everyone the opportunity if there is anything. Don't want to talk at you. Okay. I'll wait for the chat. L'Oreal, I'm going to hand it off to you for basic street tree care.
Perfect. All right. So our the 5 steps are pretty, self-explanatory. What we want to do. That first step is removing trash from the tree beds. And you will find that, there's anything and everything in that tree bed. One of the major things that you want to focus on are cigarette butts. As we know, if you leave a cigarette butt in there and you've got that filter, all of those chemicals and whatnot do absorb into the soil. And any of that small stuff. So if you find that you have small plastic particles, remove everything basically. And then of course, if we're talking about animal excrement, that is a big, issue with tree beds, as if you happen to know, dog food these days has all sorts of different kinds of, ingredients and toxins, which really don't help the soil. So one, we want to remove the trash from the tree beds. The second step is removing weeds from the tree bed. It takes away from the nutrients that the tree can have as the soil is in the tree bed. So, when we're talking about weeds, generally it's grassy, plants or what have you. And we'll talk further about certain tree beds that do use ornamentals, which we do want to be cognizant of. Step 3, aerating the existing soil. That means that we want to turn that soil. And when we turn that soil, that means it allows the tree to be able to absorb more water. It also will help with the water runoff. So, if you notice a lot of these tree beds that are heavily compacted, when we have these heavy rains, that water just goes straight to the street tree, excuse me, come on. to the, you know, the street, and of course does not help with the tree. So aerating that soil does help with this, the tree, allowing it to absorb more moisture and more of that water. Number 4 is applying compost and mulch. Compost, of course, as you know, is that, you know, that golden material that we want our trees to have. So what, you know, Big Reuse does have a compost program where we, you know, we will use our, you know, processed compost in tree beds. But generally, you know, our street tree program, our team uses mulch, and mulch is just as good, as long as it is applied correctly. And we'll, you know, we'll talk further about that. But the mulch one, it helps aesthetically, make the tree beds look much nicer. And of course, it does help with, you know, the moisture, and allowing that tree bed to keep that moisture within the soil.
And we have slides on each of these, and we're gonna give you visuals and some more details in a moment, so.
Yeah. And then, of course, number 5, you know, we want to keep it, leave it better than you found it. So, you know, take that extra step to go around the tree bed, and to, you know, to make sure that everything, you know, looks nicer, once you leave. And then we'll talk about the special considerations in the next few slides. So when we're talking about removing trash from tree beds, you know, we always want to make sure safety first. You know, you want to make sure that you are aware of your surroundings, and, you know, traffic, pedestrians, bikes, mopeds, all of that. I mean, that's pretty much a given, but something to talk about. You may find in certain areas that there are sharp objects and needles in particular. You know, we do want to make sure that folks handle them, you know, in a safe manner. So if you happen to have a water bottle, you know, want to make sure you keep your gloves on, and then of course you can contain that needle within that bottle, and then dispose of it, not in the recycling, of course. Animal waste, generally I will keep extra plastic bags with my supplies, just so I can contain, you know, animal waste, and just toss it when I can. Now, the interesting thing with leaves, I think folks think that, you know, when you're working with tree beds, you just want to clear everything out, but you can leave the organics in there. So leaves, for the most part, as long as they're not, you know, heavily, you know, in that tree. Sometimes we've got the mature trees that have more leaves. You can generally leave the, you know, keep them in that tree bed. And then of course, natural stones. Again, those are helpful. Concrete, on the other hand, I would say, you know, remove that, but stones and all that natural things you can leave in there, and just mix it as you're aerating the soil.
And I'll just add in, thank you, Linda D, who mentioned this. Of course, we're wearing gloves at all times. You know, better to have thicker gardening gloves. We're not touching things that are sharp, especially when we're working with kids. We have very clear guidelines on that. There are some trash pickers people prefer to use, but yes, you do always want to wear gloves.
And just on a side note, something that I've sort of picked up, if you have tongs, like the kitchen tongs, those also are great to pick up the smaller stuff. So bottle caps are rather common. Those cigarette butts as well, if you don't want to use your gloved hands. And then,
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, and of course, if it's larger, or if there's bigger amounts of trash or a consistent issue, contact DSNY directly. You of course can, and it's great to work with local community groups. And it's important that you notice if something's happening consistently in a consistent spot, possibly from I don't know, a business or neighbors or something, making sure, again, we're not talking about snitching, we're talking about holding each other accountable and caring for these trees. So contacting DSNY, another thing that was mentioned in the chat, in terms of when you're seeing trees that need something, reaching out, of course, to the city, and unfortunately having to wait a while. 311, we're going to talk about it later, but we highly recommend using 311. And again, if you're interested in more of this, we'll talk about it in our second presentation. So you can see again here, our volunteers all have their gloves on. We all know what weeds are, I think, but we know that weeds are not, excuse me, we know that weeds are, oops, I lost everyone. We know that weeds are not, you know, the ornamentals, like they're not flowers. Weeds are, you know, this picture is a really great example. They're not supposed to be in the tree bed, and they're taking resources from that tree. So you do want to pull out weeds. And if you can, if you have either hand tools, you want to try to do that at the root or as close to the root as possible, to ensure that it's going to hopefully not grow back or take a longer time to grow back. L'Oreal, I'll hand it back to you for aerating. This, I would say, is probably one of the most important parts of the process.
Right. So,
Oops, excuse me.
oh,
She was being
yes.
funny.
Again, tool safety. We always want to make sure, especially working with kids and just in general, always keep the pointed tool down to the ground. I mean, we just, you know, are want to make sure that folks are safe at all times. I won't go into all of the other, you know, bits about tool safety. I think most folks know, just to make sure that, you know, we keep everyone safe around us. And when we're aerating the existing soil, you want to loosen about 2 to 3 inches of that soil. So if you have your shovel or, you know, if you have your long handled tools, you know, you want to get 2 to 3 inches, and that will, you know, that will allow, again, that absorption of water. You will notice that while you're aerating, you'll find that there might be some rootlets or the root system. Of course, the smaller roots are the ones that are the, you know, the newer root system. And yes, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's likely that some of them will be damaged, but you do want to make sure to avoid, you know, hitting any of those major root systems, and just be cognizant of, you know, if you hit something and you know, you're really trying to pull that out clearly, that's something to just leave in there. And then of course, you know, start at the base of the trunk, and then work your way out. And if you were thinking of how far out do you want to aerate the soil, generally you want to try to do the entirety of the tree beds. And I think if some folks have noticed, a lot of these tree beds have been expanded as New York City Parks realizes that these tree beds need a bigger house and a bigger home. So, you know, if you are at a tree, you know, you can place your hand on that tree trunk and then just walk around that tree trunk, and that'll give you a sense of the diameter in which you want to aerate the soil. That's the ideal. And if you have extra time, you know, definitely go ahead and, you know, aerate the entirety of that tree bed. So, you know, if it's not the traditional tree bed, again, 5 to 6 inch ring around the trunk. And you want to work from the trunk to the tree that you, you know, walked along as you have your hand on that trunk.
Beautiful. Being really mindful of those roots. And you can see we do create kind of this donut around the tree. Step 4, applying compost and or mulch. You know, you do want to add 1, maximum 3. Really, when it's compost, depending on if it's mixed, and again, we'll give you a visual of this, unsifted or sifted, and then if it's mulch, more like 3 inches. And it can also, again, keep those weeds down and hold in that moisture, not only from what's in the air, but also rain and snow, the other elements, in addition to, of course, protecting it. We like, and we find it's very important to keep a 3 to 4 inch ring around that the trunk of the tree, specifically for all the reasons L'Oreal just mentioned and that I just mentioned with moisture. If that gets too close to the trunk, we're talking about potentially hurting the tree, and we definitely don't want to do that. So yeah, that's the basis of applying the material. I said earlier, these are the photos. So this is on the left, a wood chip mulch material, and on the right, an unscreened finished compost. So you can see it's similar because this compost is actually mixed with wood chips, which helps absorb the moisture from it. So we're talking about two different kinds of material, which is why we would stack it differently, 1 inch and to 3 inches. And then when we're talking about compost, there are a lot of different materials. Our team, we have a whole other team. If you or your community group is interested in learning more about compost and what was formerly the Compost Project, happy to connect you. Right now, we have the Compost Project has been renamed because it is no longer funded by DSNY. It is funded by City Council exclusively. So grateful for that. And they are called the New York City Community Composting Network, and they are still collecting food scraps to turn into compost, which not to be confused with the brown bin program, which is anaerobically, for the most part, anaerobically digested. A small amount does go to Fresh Kills in Staten Island. That being said, if you're interested in procuring compost, local community sourced compost that's from your local community garden or other partners, part of the community compost network is the way to go. I think the personally I feel the quality there is the highest, and the DSNY has bagged material from Fresh Kills that they do hand out. They have a limited supply, so again, if you are interested in getting those bags, they say they're 50 pounds. I feel, yeah, these 35 to 50 pound bags, you are able to request them and they have giveaways across the city. Again, reach out directly to DSNY for that. So the last step, L'Oreal, take it away.
It's pretty self-explanatory. This is the leave it better than you found it. So, once you're completed with your, the first 4 steps, you just want to sweep around the area and just, clean it up nicely. Of course, you want to make sure, if you're with a group, you want to keep track of your tools, make sure you bring back all of the material and what have you to the group leaders, and, leave it nice for everyone else.
Beautifully said. Very simple, right? So there are some special considerations, and I'll let L'Oreal speak to this. We won't go into it too deeply, but just to understand that there are special considerations. Okay, maybe I'll take it.
The next slide.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Yes. So and this is a hot topic for folks, because when we're talking about permits, this tends to scare folks off. But the permits are, when you are doing basic, the 5 basic steps of street tree care, you do not need a permit. So if you see, you walk past a tree bed and you notice, there's trash, clearly you can pick that up. But in terms of any type of work that is beyond those 5 steps that are specific to construction, removal around or in that tree bed, that requires a permit. You can apply for it through New York City Parks, generally takes about 2 weeks. And once you receive that permit, then you can proceed with the work. And this is, can be a little confusing for folks, especially who are dealing with removal of, let's say, cobblestones. That type of work requires a permit. If you want to install a tree guard, that would require a permit. So again, any type of work that is beyond those 5 steps that require, more than what is listed in those 5 steps. So we'll provide you with that information. But again, the general work, if you are, just wanting to aerate the soil, does not require a permit. Again, those the complex tree guards will need that permit. And then of course, for folks who want to sort of expand their their skills and would like to get the pruner certification, we are partnered with Trees NY and we've worked with them in the past. and they provide a certification where you will receive a certification for 3 years, and you can go out and actually prune trees, remove branches, and anything, clip branches or what have you. And I would say, just on a side note, it's immensely helpful to the Parks Department because, as you know, they have very limited funding. In fact, it's not even 1% of the budget. So again, this is an advanced step for folks, but it is helpful, to have this type of training available to our stewards.
And
And
I'll,
so, sorry, just on a
sorry,
side note, this is only available in October.
and just an addition, it was a question. Thank you, Eve, for asking. The permits themselves are free. It is free to apply for a permit and get a permit. There is no cost associated with getting a permit. Okay, tree polls.
All right. So tree polls, I think some, folks may be familiar with this, wondering why are those in there? Those, of course, are used to help stabilize a newly planted tree. And you can leave them there, but if you notice that they are loose, or so they're no longer really providing what is needed for that tree, you can remove them. But in conversation with other tree stewards, some will leave them in there because it deters dogs from actually peeing on the tree itself. So the poles can be left in there. But again, just on a side note, when a tree is newly planted, they are only insured by New York City Parks or the person who has planted them for 2 years. So that's just something to keep in mind, particularly when caring for trees, because these particular trees need the most love and the most care to survive those first 2 years. Now, this is a hot topic.
Hot
Hot
topic.
topic. Cobblestones. These particular cobblestones that you see in the photo are cobblestones that New York City Parks installed. And I think, aesthetically, they are nice. You may find that there are some tree beds that have, 2, 3, 4 rows of them. And of course, as that tree is growing, as you can see in that photo there, the soil starts raising, a lot of that because of the root system. This particular, this kind of work would require a permit. So, if you wanted to remove those cobblestones, consider, contacting your community garden to see if they can repurpose them, find another reuse for them before you want to remove those cobblestones. I've seen bricks, any type of material that really will prevent that tree from being able to grow. But again, this type of work would require a permit from New York City Parks. Okay, so tree guards, another hot topic. Tree guards and tree care signs. Gee gosh. Yes, this one does require a permit as well. We've seen, folks who will do sort of very simple, bamboo or sticks or poles, with string or what have you. That doesn't require a work permit. But generally, if if you have a look at these photos, you've got the iron type. Those are very fancy. Those tend to be a lot more expensive. But if you look at that bottom center photo, that's it's rather nice because one, it is a bench, so it has multi-purpose. But that will require the permit in order for it to be installed.
And we'll add to that that we would prefer the bench on the bottom right because it's not in the actual tree bed. Bottom center, you can see it's actually in the tree bed, which is not ideal. So you definitely want to make sure that it's at the perimeter, at the edge of the tree bed and not smaller than the bed itself. And we'll talk about this in a few moments. But there are a lot of different kinds. If you are interested in installing, again, we have that link. We will share it. Um, but you would need a permit to install this. And 311. I'm obsessed with 311. As a native New Yorker, I feel like I grew up with 311, and I feel like a lot of people today don't really use it as much as I'm going to use the word should, because it is an incredible resource that holds our elected officials and city agencies accountable. Every time you report something to 311 or something is reported to 311, there is a record of it. So the Parks Forestry team will receive complaints. I always wonder if they also receive compliments, but I don't know if anyone ever gets compliments. But yes, please, please, please report issues to 311. Someone in the chat earlier had mentioned a tree that needed pruning, and they wrote to Parks and wrote to Parks, and it took years. Speeding that up potentially is, okay, I'm saying this sentence backwards. The best way to potentially speed that up is to reach out to 311, to have your neighbors and friends do the same thing, community members, all advocating. That's a really great way to kind of move things forward. You can report everything from dangling branches to a dead tree. A new tree can take up to 2 years, but depending on where you are, Parks just recently they're rolling out a new program. So depending on how the condition of the tree and the location, you might be able to get it sooner. Any kind of destruction to the tree, you saw in that last picture, the tire and the bike chain around it, a split trunk, et cetera, et cetera. If you have something that you think is an issue to report, please call 311.
And if I may, there is also the 311 app. So that is something that you can place on your smartphone. I think one of the newest feature is that you can include photos, and I think that is a big help. So if you're talking about a big downed tree, that is more priority than it would be for a new tree. So you can actually record, you can attach photos, which helps the teams that receive these specific complaints. And the
Well,
complaint, yeah. Mhm. The complaints do go to the department in which you're in the borough that you live in. So they will directly receive those. So it's not a central, office where they get 1,000 complaints. It's the specific borough and the team within that borough in New York City Parks.
thanks, L'Oreal. Well said. The app is a great addition if you have that access for photos, which can, speed things up even further. The New York City tree map and tree care groups. L'Oreal, do you want to take this?
Yes. Yes. So the tree map sort of was born out of the Million Trees Initiative, which was how many years ago. And this is the parks identified over 800,000 trees and surveyed the trees. And if you use this map, you can place an address in the field, and it will, direct you to that specific area. And when you press on, once you get into that actual website or the website, essentially they provide the species of the tree, the last time the tree was actually worked on, whether it was by a group or by parks. The newer trees will even provide you with when they were planted, etc. And I think one of the major benefits of using the New York City tree map, is that it gives you an idea of, after you've completed working on that tree, what the benefits have been of the work that you did on that tree. So for example, how much carbon, when you've aerated that soil, what impact your work has done on that tree, and how that tree will be able to provide more to the community. And then
Fabulous.
just to the right, we have the tree care groups. It's a growing list of groups, but if you say, for example, are an eager community steward and you would like to start your own team of stewards, this is a great opportunity for you to record and document all of the work that you've done on your street trees. So this is a tool that we also use so that we can track the work that we've done, given the number of community partners and schools and whatnots that we work with. So again, it gives it allows you to look at, has this tree been cared for since it was planted in 2010? And then it'll even indicate what group, whether it's parks or the community group, has worked on that. So it's a immensely helpful tool. It also, again, will give you the species of the tree. So if you've always been curious, what tree is in front of my building and what type of tree is it, it gives you the species of the tree, which I think is super fascinating.
It's
So
amazing. It's an
yeah.
incredible resource. And citizen tree pruner certification. I can just say it's very straightforward. This is through Trees New York. The pruner course, it does cost $100. I think that's still the fee. It might be different. Don't quote me on it, but it was recently $100. It's a 9-hour course, and it's only available in the fall, 6 hours. 3 classes, 2 hours each. It's an hour and a half in the field with a final exam. It is great. It would give people who go through that not only the clout to say that they are officially a citizen pruner, but also it's a really awesome opportunity to be able to get out there and do the work yourself and know exactly what you're doing in an educated way, and support your community, support any groups you're a part of, support your neighborhood, and of course, support the trees. So that's the breakdown of kind of basic street tree care. We're going to go into a little bit of the tools and the supplies that we use in these events, or at these events with these tree cares. Then we'll talk about some things to avoid. I'll mention some of the organizations that we know provide different resources, grants, workshops, and then of course sharing our contact information, resources, and opening up to a Q&A. So we'll start with tools and supplies. Again, this was mentioned earlier, the number one thing is gloves. We bring gloves to all of our events. We also trash bags or litter pickers. We love to have sharps containers, and just to make sure to dispose of those in a safe way. Short-handed tools, in addition to yard waste bags for weeds. Those are usually the paper ones that you see leaves in. Same would be for weeds. We also have some long-handed cultivating tools. You can see them sticking out of this toter, this green plastic bin on wheels. Those are called toters, T-O-T-E-R, or plural with an S at the end. So they're sticking out of that toter right there. Buckets, bags, wheelbarrows to transport it around, the finished compost or mulch, and a broom to make sure we clean up afterwards. A close-up of some of these. It's pretty self-explanatory. I don't know. L'Oreal, do you have a favorite? Do you want to speak to one or the other, or some of these tools? We also have hand tools. I personally love the hand weeder. I love it because you're able to, you see the fork here at the end to get around the actual stem of the weed. And then this hook you're able to leverage it against the ground to really get the weed out, especially when those weeds have stronger roots. I can't speak enough. It's one of my favorites. Do you have a favorite, L'Oreal?
I have to say the pickaxe is rather nice. There's a double-sided pickaxe, which really helps, especially with compacted tree beds, because some of the tree beds have not been given any love for years. So if you can get a tool that really gets into there, that's the tool I would use.
Yeah, I think honestly, those would be also those two recommendations. I think you can do everything with because again, aerating that soil is the number one thing. And I would say weeding, in my opinion, is the second most important because those weeds are taking away resources and aerating that soil is letting those resources to the tree beds. So, yeah, so those are our tools and supplies, things to avoid. L'Oreal, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, for some folks who've walked around the city, you can see anything and everything when it comes to tree beds. And some things to definitely, report or avoid are, tree beds that are enclosed. So if they don't, for example, if you look on that left side, that tree, that concrete that was that encloses all of that soil doesn't allow the water to run off. So essentially, it's creating a situation for the tree bed that won't, allow better absorption. So again, the water runoff, it just adds to the water runoff. When you have a tree guard, I think something like this on the right side, I imagine the idea was, you know, the individual probably thought that it looked nice. It would avoid humans and animals from, going into the tree bed, and also perhaps avoid, any, you know, uh, litter that would go into the tree. You can't see it in the picture, but there's actually a layer of fencing also around that particular tree bed. But if you look at that, that's middle part of that trunk, um, it is that particular ring is now at the point where it is preventing that tree trunk from being able to grow properly. So it's constricting that tree.
A lot of times people, thanks, L'Oreal, a lot of times people do this because they don't want garbage getting in or animals or, they're trying to protect and they have the best intentions. However, it really is not the best for the tree. It's really limiting. So you want to definitely avoid that. Um, you would think, I think if I put, the picture on the left in the New Yorker, everyone would think that's a comic, but that is actually a tree bed guard that someone put around the tree. It's, I don't even think 1 foot, 1 square foot. Yes, I'm happy to see some people laughing. Do not build a tree bed guard that reduces the size of the bed. This goes back to that picture before when we saw that bench that was inside the tree guard. We want to give that soil and that tree bed all of their space. So we definitely don't want to build a tree bed guard that reduces it. And you don't want to mulch or compost volcano. This is way too high. It's way too close. You can see there's a little bit of space around that trunk, but it's too much. So don't build a mulch volcano.
Right.
Hand it back to you, L'Oreal.
And in terms of that mulch volcano, that can cause root rot. So if you're not providing that area or that space, that's sort of the eventual very slow dying of that tree. So other things to avoid: plant woody shrubs. We do not want to do that. So if you look on that left side, while it may seem like that's, filling in the space of that big tree bed, it's actually preventing that tree from the nutrients that it could need, that it could get. But unfortunately, that particular bush is preventing that tree from doing so. And then on that right side, the raising of the soil level around your tree. Again, if you notice, we don't want that to occur. And it's enclosed. So we don't want, the enclosure is not helpful either. And what it's doing is, while we do want to make sure a tree bed does have at the least the level of the sidewalk, once you can, once you continue raising that level of the soil, that too can can cause that root rot.
So, thank you. Those are the things to avoid. We'll jump in, continuing on. These are some of kind of, we call them tremendous organizations. They're organizations around the city that are really doing great work with trees. I'm personally honored to work with Forest for All New York. We also do a lot of programming with New York Restoration Project, which has community gardens across the city. Parks, of course, does tremendous work, tremendous work. I'll stop now. L'Oreal, do you want to speak to any of them specifically or your experience?
Right. And if folks aren't familiar with Partnership for Parks, that is the nonprofit organization for New York City parks. So that is another organization that folks can reach out to if you are interested in focusing more on parks related stewardship. And of course, they do provide technical support if you wanted to start a friends group in your local park. You would want to make sure that you do, make sure that there's not one that currently exists there. But you can, lean on them for that type of support.
Yep.
And let's see, I believe with the Million Trees, there's the census will be coming up in the next year or two. So that is something where stewards can be a great help as New York City Parks, starts counting and looking at how many trees have been added to the urban canopy since the last census, which was in 2015.
Which is
So,
wild. So almost
yeah.
10 years later.
Yeah. Mhm.
We have worked a lot with these local tree groups. So depending on the borough that you're in, unfortunately, we have not done any work in Staten Island yet. So these are kind of our top friends and colleagues in terms of just people who are really doing great work and caring for trees. These are all they're a mix of nonprofits, friends groups, volunteers. It's incredible. Again, if you're interested in L'Oreal, just dropped it in the chat and probably will drop another one, but look at the New York City tree map groups, really. Look at that map and check out the NYC Stew map, which is for stewardship, to find out groups in your area. You don't have to go and recreate the wheel. There are people doing this in or around your neighborhood, I promise. And if not, connect with us and we'll figure out a way to help support you because we really believe in this work and we're guessing you do too. So branch out to us. Again, the puns continue. We can't help ourselves. These are all of our email addresses. Gil, our colleague, of course, is not here, but at any point, feel free to reach out to us in email with any questions that you have. We will open this up to a Q&A. But before we do that, L'Oreal, do you have any thoughts or anything that you want to share? Oops, excuse me.
I, do want to say, give a big thanks and appreciation to all of you for attending. As a steward, your work is important, especially as our urban canopy is expanding. And we always need folks who really have that urge to go out there, whether you're doing it as an individual or if you're going, and want to start and initiate a new group. So we're very appreciative. And, it's people like you that help make sure that our trees really can survive.
Yeah, can't really well said, L'Oreal. We're not joking. I'm not joking. I'll speak for myself. I answer email, like I will answer your email. If you send us an email, I will definitely answer it. If you need something, we will definitely be here. And just to let you know that these are the tree sources. Again, this is recorded. You will have access to it. If you're interested in part two, our next part two will be in person. It'll be March 8th at the Queens Library in Astoria. We have done part two, L'Oreal and I have actually done part two ourselves online. Maybe it was it was, I think in November we did it. So that recording's on our website. And that goes into recapping this, but also talking about how to recruit volunteers, giving you a checklist for your event, resources. We'll go into a little bit more details of the tree map and talking about what stewardship looks like in each season, year long, how specifically we should work on gardening in tree beds if you're interested in adding specific perennials or hopefully annuals. We prefer annuals in tree beds. If your neighborhood association is really focused on that and you feel the tree is healthy enough to sustain it and gets enough care that you can. And we'll also talk about stewarding rain gardens and, cultivating a community of stewards and what that means. So if you are interested, there is still space that is in person in Queens, March 8th, 11 a.m. And again, all of this will be shared with everyone here. So that being said, this is now a space for all of you to open it up to Q&A. I think L'Oreal, we've both tried to, answer questions while we were both presenting. You're also kind. Thank you. I mean, you're saying thank you to us, but we can't thank you enough because you are the ones doing this work. We're all in this together. Sounds very cheesy, but it's very true. So we'd love to open this up to questions, anything, please.
And
Feel
we
free
do
to
have a question. We
Yeah.
do have a question about the gator bags.
Please, Robert, if you want to unmute and ask.
I think we have to unmute them.
Oh, maybe we unmute you.
But I think when it comes to gator bags, again, the intention is good. The idea of a gator bag, if folks are not familiar with it, it's usually it helps contain water in the young trees in particular. So, in those first 2, 3, 4 years, it is important, especially as our summers do, have become much more intensely hot. So, newly planted trees definitely require at least 5 gallons. Is that correct? 5 gallons of water a day. Is that what it is? I mean, I know it's an immense amount of water. So the gators, if they are not maintained, are a hindrance to the tree. So, more often than not, you'll find that there are trees that do have them around them, but if they're not used correctly, then it does, it's a hindrance to the tree. So generally, it's, if
Robert,
you
off mute, so he can also, you can speak, Robert. I'm not sure if you have a specific question.
Yeah, well, I'm using gator bags at about 8 trees on my block that were recently planted by the city, and they're strange. Like some of them you got to be careful about how you set them in, so because they have to drain. And what you were saying about not having too much mulch right around the tree, so I would think you would have to clear away that ring of mulch and let the bag sit on as much as possible on the ground. Is that correct? Otherwise you get sometimes the bags seem to get clogged and the water does not drain properly, just sits there. Other bags work fine. Other bags do clog up. So I guess the question is like, do you recommend that clearing away the mulch so the bag can sit directly on the ground? Like functioning within the ring of the mulch ring that you were discussing earlier.
Oh, if there's a mulch ring. I mean, ideally, you want that gator to be able to be, right at ground level. So
Right.
you don't have really much of a hindrance, but at the same time, that mulch can help with the absorption of that water. So in general, I mean, I have not often seen a tree bed with a gator and mulch. But I think in general, I think for the purpose of the gator, you probably want to, avoid using the mulch for the time being.
Yeah, well, it's already there. They've dumped a ton. They gave us metal tree pits. They gave us a ton of mulch, and those 8-foot tree pits or whatever the big large ones that they have now. they filled that up with mulch. And they did leave a recession around the tree. And I was just concerned that just how deep we should go. Maybe, leave a couple of inches of mulch on the bottom or an inch or something like that on top, below the bag or something like.
Yeah, I would leave it. I would keep it minimal.
Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
Almost possible. Great question, Robert.
thank you.
So,
Thank you for what you do.
any other questions? You're all so kind in these comments. Thank you, Ashley, seeing yours. We really would love to hear from you. We'd love, if we don't have the answer, we'll find it or we'll refer you to someone, but we'd love to open this up to anyone who wants to share any thoughts, any questions, anything. Eve wrote before asking about backyard trees, and L'Oreal shared the New York Parks recommendation, and then I shared about NYRP. They're getting into their tree giveaway season where they do tree giveaways across all the boroughs, and it's specifically for private homes, backyards. It's not street trees, but it's for private spaces. So if you are, and L'Oreal, because L'Oreal is amazing for many reasons, one being that she just dropped that that link in the chat. So if you are interested in procuring, and if you need help with that, also let us know. We'd be happy to assist. So, we've got a question from Laura. My tree roots are exposed in the pit. Should I just find some dirt to put on top? So when your tree roots are exposed, you really want to work around those roots. You do not want to put anything on top of your tree roots because that goes into what we spoke about before with root rot. It could create too much moisture and it could be really dangerous for the trees. So we would recommend kind of putting your mulchy dirt compost in a very thin layer in and around the roots so that at least your tree bed can absorb some of those nutrients and be somewhat protected. I would personally watch and see how the tree handles it, and then slowly, as you can, increase the amount. I don't know, L'Oreal, if you want to add to that.
I would pretty much agree. Yeah.
Okay.
And Maggie, I did unmute you if you had an additional question.
Thanks. Yes, thank you. As far as getting, if we want to gather a few people and we want to have, get tools beyond whatever we might have personally already, did you mention whether we can go to, who we would go to if we were getting resources for that, so we didn't have to spend it ourselves?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Maggie. L'Oreal, I'm not sure. My first feeling is always to go look in the community and look for a local community garden that might have those resources and be open to lending them. Not only would they have resources to share, but also probably human power that would maybe want to get involved to continue building community. I would also add to that if you are building a group that's kind of interested in continuing this work and you're interested in procuring your own copy, or that's not the right word, your own set of tools. There are definitely those organizations we shared, in addition to Sanitation Foundation, offers grants where they actually will gift you a set of multiple tools and resources for exactly that. L'Oreal, anything you want to add to that for Maggie?
No, although I do know that you did had a question regarding the New York City Parks tree map earlier on how to use it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you had, I somehow didn't process the connection between, like, if we work on a tree bed, how that information goes onto the map so the next people know when it was worked on, or is that if you're in a tree group, it happens through them, or?
You can do it. You can record any tree work that you've completed in the New York City Parks tree map. So either as an individual or as a group. So if you're not familiar with the website itself, once you open that link, on that far right, there will be a field where you can input your address. And then what it will do is it will bring you to the map, to the area that you are looking for. And then, it will, it provides the map of all those trees that are planted at that specific address.
Right.
Each, you'll notice that there are different colors specific to each of the types of trees, which refer to the age of the tree. So the green ones are younger. So each color is specific to the age of the tree. And then once you do click onto that the bubble, which is the tree itself, it will give you an overview of that specific tree. So that includes the species, that includes who worked on it last. It provides, the age of the tree, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you do, submit the work that you do, which includes, did you water the tree? Did you aerate the soil? Did you apply mulch or compost? After that submission, it calculates what the benefits are of that tree work that you just provided, which is really neat on the map.
It's an incredible tool.
I've seen the map just to know what tree is that, but a while ago, but I didn't go in to see that you could actually interact and use it that way. So that's great.
Yeah.
Maggie. A few more questions that came up, L'Oreal, while you and Maggie were discussing the tree map. Linda mentioned so many nice homes ignore their tree spaces, how to get them more involved, publicity blurbs or whatever. I think in my experience, leading by example has been the most powerful and unintentional, honestly, as people see what can be done and are empowered. L'Oreal spoke to this earlier in the presentation when, we said so many people, even with us, they say, oh, can we do this? Do we have permission? Are we allowed? And when they see you doing it, when they see neighbors, when they see community groups doing it, and then they see those trees growing, and especially as they're here longer, it's really powerful. And people do, in my opinion, get involved. Again, adding on to what we've been saying about getting involved with your local community garden or tree steward group from Trees New York map, from the New York City tree map, et cetera, building community is, I think we definitely highlighted this a bit at the beginning, but it continues to be one of the strongest and most powerful things in the age of AI and technology. Humanity is stronger than ever. So I personally feel closely tied to that. I also want to, and Linda, please comment if there's something else or a follow-up question. I want to also emphasize Polly had a great comment about leaving leaves in their tree bed to cover the root system. That is phenomenal. Trees have, leaves have incredible nutrients in them and are almost the most organic, pun intended, okay, fine, but organic source of nutrients. So they are light. They will break apart naturally with the weather as they're falling naturally during that time of year. And even if the roots are above ground, they're going to find little crevices and really nature doing its thing. I mean, think about a forest, right? Trees live there and the leaves fall and land on the root systems, and then it all kind of breaks down. So 100% leave them, and I would even encourage it. It's a great way for that tree that has an overgrown root system to make sure it's getting some nutrients. So definitely, even above ground. And a special shout out to Ashley. Thank you. Ashley shared, Maggie, that link directly for Sanitation Foundation and said that they are accepting applications that are due on March 1st. So your timing is absolutely perfect. Thank you again, Ashley, for dropping that link in the chat. So you can go ahead and L'Oreal also just sent a link about Sanitation Foundation's community stewards. So we have Eve who raised their hand. I'm just going to quickly just mention Fennell. I'm apologizing. My name is always mispronounced. So if I'm mispronouncing that, how can someone remove rats from the bottom of the tree without killing it? Rat prevention, Rat Academy. Rats are a hot topic. The best thing I would say for rats is keeping your streets and your tree bed clean and free from food waste. The number one reason that rats are in the streets is because they're looking for food. So, and they're hiding in beds. If beds are being taken care of and tended to, and there are no food waste around there, the rats will go somewhere else. I know that seems like a simple answer, but please, L'Oreal, and then we'll go to Eve.
And if I may, just touch on the rat prevention training. I've taken it a couple times because it's unbelievably fascinating. It's a 2-hour training and it goes through the behavior of a rat. The training is available for community gardens specific, which I think would probably speak more to street tree care. But then there's also the general training. But again, it's the behavior of the rat itself. They only have, a 1-mile radius where they travel. So they're not going long distances. Things to consider are, if you've got your tree bed and you've got a garbage can right there or something of that sort. Again, rats are, pretty complex rodents. So they know how to survive. Whether it's, nesting and burrowing and, in the ground, and also, the travel area that they have, where they know where to find the food source. So I included the link in there, and I would highly recommend, it's really fun. I'd highly recommend looking into it. They have it every month. And it's available for community gardens, for residents, for buildings, and for superintendents. So it's fun.
Thank you. Perfect, L'Oreal. And I've heard the same thing. Eve, we're going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Please do share. We're here for your question. Thanks for being patient. Eve? Nope. We lost Eve. I'm trying. Eve, if you can hear us. Okay. Maybe Eve, if you want to share it in the chat. Ooh. The host cannot unmute individually. Okay, I'm not sure, Eve. L'Oreal, do you have an idea?
We've clicked on, and I believe that you've got to unmute, but let's just double check. Yo no sé. In any case, feel free to text your question in the chat.
Yeah, and we'll stop sharing. We don't need to be pinned. We're all here. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, Eve's gonna drop their question here.
Oh.
Okay, so when I was a kid, I was pruning trees in Prospect Park back in the 70s. Wow, that's really cool. We used to put tar on the cut. I see that the city doesn't do that. So is that not a practice anymore? Wow, Eve, I'm really bummed that you couldn't share yourself with audio. I don't know why that wasn't working, but that's really interesting. I personally can't answer it. L'Oreal, do you know?
The tar?
Yeah. Do you have any idea if that's not a practice anymore? I'm not familiar.
Oh, okay. I am not familiar with that, but I do recall that used to be a practice. But I am not sure that is presently such. We'll do some research and can get back to you.
Okay, yeah. If you want, Eve, just our email addresses were shared before. Shoot us an email or drop your email here and we'll follow up with you. But neither of us know off the top of our heads. Yeah, thanks for sharing. All right. It has been an absolute pleasure being here with all of you. Just want to emphasize again, thank you for your work. Thank you for what you do. L'Oreal just dropped our emails in the chat. Thank you for being in the streets and tending to the trees. It's, no one's telling you great job. The trees can't talk, but they're giving you love in other ways. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for spending a Saturday afternoon here with us. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, reach out to us, email. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to continue supporting you and the work you're doing in your neighborhoods. All right. Take care, everyone. Hope to see you on the streets with the trees.
See you on the streets.
Bye.
Take care. Oh. See ya. Take care, folks. Robert, did you have a question? I've asked you to unmute. Are you able to? Let me just check.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes.
I would say no about the tar because the tar has got a lot of toxic material in it.
Yeah.
It's good for patching holes on rooftops and sewer edges and stuff like that, but I
Sure.
don't think that might have been something they used to do because, oh, we tar the wooden ship, to keep it from sinking, to stop leaks. But I don't think it's a very good idea. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I've been to Big Reuse a number of times out there on next to Lowe's.
Yeah.
I get a lot of books there that I read.
Yes. We'll make sure to keep an eye out for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. Take care.
You too.
All right.